Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that little break and ready for our final speaker. This is definitely one of those best for last situations. We welcome her and thank all the other speakers that have led up to where we are now. We're almost done. Caroline Hilton is our final speaker. I just read her book. It's fabulous. You need to get it if you haven't gotten it yet. And today she's going to talk to us about an Indigenous perspective on the role of tech in the emerging Indigenous economy. Enjoy.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Caroline Hilton and I'm the CEO and founder of the Indigenomics Institute. I'm calling in today from the Lekwungen territory in Victoria, British Columbia, the traditional territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt people. Thank you so much for putting together this conference. To be able to understand digital sovereignty in today's modern age of Indigenous reality, this concept of lighting the pathway to connectivity is essential to our current reality and to our future. When we can better understand the purpose of technology to be able to enable effective data to share and to address society challenges, to help innovate and to be able to create efficiency, effective, and functioning realities based in our social and economic reality. To be able to build an Indigenous perspective on the role of technology in the emerging Indigenous economy, I introduce to you the concept of Indigenomics and the alliance and the integration of technology to our economic and social reality. To return to the purpose of technology, to align to our social and economic realities, these are the big challenges of today. To be able to understand that the work of the Indigenomics Institute is shaping money, meaning, and metrics in the emerging $100 billion Indigenous economy. I refer to the concept of Indigenomics as modern, constructive, generative, Indigenous economic design. To be able to understand the role of technology in the emerging $100 billion Indigenous economy, the concept of money, meaning, and metrics are essential to our success. When we look at the role of data and understand data to be built and designed by us versus data that is happening to us, the role of data and technology in the emerging Indigenous economy are essential that we are able to build the investability and the structures and design of our economies and community life. To connect money as a tool, as a technology, and to be able to look at it as a modern function within the relative design of our economies today. This is Indigenomics. We refer to that concept of money and the ability to shape meaning and metrics and the use of technology with the concept of being an equalizer. What is it that we mean technology is an equalizer? If technology can be used to serve to improve the quality of life, and we understand that this government has invested $18 billion within this current budget to invest into the concept of closing the socioeconomic gap. What is the socioeconomic gap? Why is the language used of Indigenous peoples are falling behind? When we can connect the role of technology as an equalizer that brings into awareness our connectivity, our relationships, and our ability to function within our community and economies, then yes, technology as an equalizer is about access, it's about inclusion, it is about changing the story of the socioeconomic gap of this country. To be able to understand technology specifically as an enabler of Indigenous economic design, I refer to my work with the Indigenomics Institute in establishing the concept of an Indigenomics economic mix, which is 12 levers of economic growth or enablers that support the design of our economies and communities. From a nation-building perspective, seeing technology as an enabler, it becomes essential to pay attention to where it is that we're seeing this. Technology as a driver of Indigenous economic growth. I want to refer to this concept seen within an Indigenous worldview of connecting our human relationships to time, to place, and energy, to the life force itself, and realizing the role of technology in uplifting the ability to function within our own communities, our own nation building processes, and the uplifting of our economic systems and design of what will allow us to be successful and create the social and economic well-being as the intention. When we look in this immediate environment of the application of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we see and can uplift the role of connectivity and the rights to that within our communities, the accessibility and our ability to facilitate what that means, particularly in a post-COVID economic environment. To be able to understand where are we seeing technology in the growth and design of the Indigenous economy, I turn your attention to examples such as Plato, an Indigenous software testing company, who is a front runner in engaging an Indigenous workforce in the application of software and inclusion within industries that support the application of software testing for Indigenous workers. We can look to the Indigenous Guardian programs, where we're seeing the mapping technologies that are supporting the data and shaping meaning and decision-making in the protection and upholding of our Indigenous territories. When we see examples like here in Victoria with the Songhees Innovation Center, with technology placed at the center of looking at a suite of technologies to support access to innovation and application of Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs. We can look to examples like the Hill Agency by Megan O'Brien, an Indigenous video game company that is supporting and building entry of Indigenous video gaming technology in its application. Realizing we see examples in the recent months of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, who has described $1 billion of investment into Indigenous infrastructure as part of a post-COVID economic response. When we're seeing ownership of hydrofiber, of entire energy corridors, rail lines, airlines, all owned by Indigenous people. It is within the design of our economies that we're beginning to see technology as a driver, as an enabler, and as an innovative pathway to our increased ownership and participation within our businesses and within industries. Where we see technology in the growing and emerging Indigenous economy is essential to pay attention to. I looked here in BC also the example of a Connected North program, of TALUS connectivity, and looking at the increased ability to facilitate connectivity of Indigenous communities in new and innovative ways. Again, I draw your attention where we're seeing particularly numbers that are representing up to 75% of Indigenous communities are not adequately connected to the internet. Realizing that this concept of connectivity, access to technology, and our ability to innovate are all essential to building an appropriate response to now. To be able to understand that essentially this concept of our human relationship to time, place, and energy, the role in uplifting or upholding of technology and companies that are supporting the growth and design of our economies, our communities, and our nations are essential. I draw your attention to a company based in Ontario called Origins. Essentially, being able to look at this company that is driving the application of building tools and education and inclusion systems for Indigenous workers to access industries and sectors in a way never seen before through virtual reality. Being able to understand Indigenous worldview, perspectives, and leadership within technology development is essential. To be able to build from our worldview, to be able to build systems, pathways, and technology based on inclusion, we can see in examples such as Origin, the realization that the access to technology as a bridge to support workforce development, inclusion, and the access to new sectors, industry, and education tools. We look to examples such as Origins as a virtual reality company driven from an Indigenous perspective. The role of technology in the emerging Indigenous economy has never been more important. I referred to the concept previously of the Indigenomics economic mix, so 12 levers to support the growth and design of the Indigenous economy. With technology being one of those fundamental levers, we also look to the role of innovation, equity ownership, procurement, capital, clean energy, trade, commerce, all of these aspects being part of an economic mix that supports the design of our Indigenous economy. When we can see each one of these as an enabler or driver of Indigenous economic growth, upholding the pathways to connectivity has never been more important. When we begin to understand the investment and design of Indigenous economies, previously I described the role of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank in creating a pathway for investment. Emerging examples including in Nunavut of a $1.6 billion hydrofiber project. These examples build the participation, visual actualization of Indigenous peoples in significant infrastructure and economic projects, sitting at the economic table, essentially as owners, as investors, as partners, and as drivers of innovation in ways never seen before. It's in these examples of connectivity of the hydrofiber link, particularly within the Nunavut region, that we can understand the role of clean energy, connectivity, technology, and essentially the ability to look at infrastructure and its connection to technology as significant in the role of the emerging Indigenous economy. The next example I bring to your attention is Okwaho Network with Shira Barbara Stock, which is an Indigenous social network designed to remove the geographical and financial barriers that remote communities often face in their attempt of connecting. The network essentially is established to be able to attract Indigenous members around the world looking to connect within a social or professional basis. When we can understand that a company like this invested within a partner company of Okwaho Equal Source, an accompanying social enterprise, that we begin to overcome the challenges of investment and the financing of the uptake of our businesses to establish inclusion and connectivity. I referred previously to the work of Megan Byron, a Métis woman from Moose Cree, who in an early development of Indigenous gaming is a front runner in being able to bring Indigenous perspectives to technology, gaming, and the ability to look at technology as a connector both within media, online, and through community. To utilize the concept of imaginative, the innovations of technology from an Indigenous perspective are endless. I referred previously to the work of the Professional Aboriginal Testing Organization, also a front runner within the technology space, of creating the ability of Indigenous inclusion, the development of Indigenous workforce, using technology as a platform to be able to test from. When we look to education and to be able to understand Indigenous participation within STEM, to realize the landscape of Indigenous inclusion in sciences and maths, it becomes essential that Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous science, Indigenous engineering, and our worldview are essential to the development of technology today, and how that is reflected within the management of our territories, the management of our economies, and the progression of our nation's building pathway. Again, in looking to examples of where we are seeing technology as an enabler or equalizer within the growth and design of the emerging $100 billion Indigenous economy, I draw your attention to BlackBerry that is in its own project helping to modernize Indigenous people's technology infrastructure in collaboration with Forest Green and Microsoft, to be able to essentially bring a comprehensive mix of next generation secure communication, cybersecurity, cloud, AI, and ML technologies to Indigenous communities across Canada. It is in the leadership of companies such as Microsoft or BlackBerry that are offering tangible pathways of Indigenous inclusion within technology and its development of our communities and increased participation both in education and workforce development. On the work of the technology superclusters, the focus of an Indigenous perspective, looking at the ability to include underrepresented groups such as Indigenous peoples around skill development, telecommunication systems used within the resource sector. To be able to understand the support and pathway of inclusion of Indigenous youth within science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics to support careers in digital technology, these opportunities are new and emerging at a pace that we need to be able to pay attention to and respond to. To uphold the concept of Indigenous technologists, I refer to this concept of self-determination and the ability of a company out here on the West Coast called Anamiki, a digital agency that is striving to support social innovation through Indigenous technology. To be able to have a company like Anamiki focusing on the original 7 teachings of Indigenous reality and worldview and connecting that to the development of customer software so that clients can maintain control of their data. Anamiki's custom software development, grant software, and data ownership is driving technology development in new ways for communities, businesses, and corporations. To be able to understand that Indigenous-led technology perspectives are essential to the growth and design of the Indigenous economy. To be able to understand essentially, in drawing some of these examples and bringing these to your attention, this concept of digital sovereignty, data ownership, and lighting pathways to connectivity as the foundation to Indigenous economic design, that is Indigenomics. I wanted to acknowledge the work of Clear Sky in bringing this forum together and bringing the leadership together around advancing technology, advancing connectivity, and increasing and raising and elevating the role of technology in our emerging modern reality. My work at the Indigenomics Institute is shaping the $100 billion Indigenous economy. Technology is a cornerstone or a pillar to that. The uptake of partnerships, our relationships of software, the design and development of technologies is essential to our success. A $100 billion Indigenous economy in itself is not the success. The success lies in overcoming the barriers and challenges to growth. Technology offers a pathway to that. Connectivity offers a pathway to that. To be able to understand the role of technology in the emerging $100 billion Indigenous economy, to be able to facilitate our leadership, to facilitate bringing our partnerships together, in examples of which I've outlined, these are places where we can see inclusion of Indigenous peoples in the workforce, leadership of Indigenous thought and worldview in its application in technology, leadership in being able to connect technology as a tool for the management of our territories, utilizing technology as an enabler of Indigenous economic design, calling the leadership for technology pathways is the task of today. Looking to companies like IBM or Microsoft or BlackBerry all point to the realization of Indigenous economic actualization as essential function of our success today. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and participate in your event. And while I wish I could be there with you in person, I thank the organizers for your leadership in bringing this to the attention and bringing into the awareness the importance of both technology and connectivity to our modern reality and to our success today. I wish you all success within the work that you are doing to be able to elevate Indigenous reality, our social and economic well-being, and centering technology as essential to our success today. Let's have the courage to do this together. Thank you.